Hello and welcome to Power Moves, the podcast that not only introduces you to successful entrepreneurs, but gets them really talking about what they did to create their success. I'm your host, Alex Edwards, and today I have Zoe Schroeder, who's a registered dietitian, certified strength and conditioning specialist, founder of Zoe Schroeder Nutrition, and leader of a rapidly growing virtual dietitian coaching practice. Zoe's helped hundreds of women break free from chronic dieting, build confidence around food, and achieve sustainable results. I've had the pleasure of working with Zoe for the past few months in her business. And after getting to know her, I've really admired the way she thinks about business and what she's built. So I felt she would be an amazing guest to have on the podcast today. Hello, Zoe. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited for today's conversation.
Absolutely, me too. So for our listeners, I always like to have the guest open up just introducing who they are to give them a bit more context.
Yeah, well, like you said, I'm Zoe Schroeder. I live in Arizona, so I have been an Arizona sunshine lover my whole life, and that feels, really like a core piece of me. But also, I love outside of my business, nutrition and fitness and being active and traveling, exploring new places. That's all really critical to just who I am as a person. And that actually bled over into my career, of course, as a registered dietitian, helping people achieve the same sense of food freedom and sustainable results that took me a very long time to get to in my own journey. And it has become something that I'm so passionate about. And that was really the catalyst for what started me to want to be a registered dietitian after I was, in college and kind of muddling through trying to figure out what it was that I wanted to be doing. But then also to make that leap to go ahead and start my own business 5.5 years ago to help so many more people via the online coaching space than I could in, an 8-hour day just meeting with people in my full-time position.
Amazing. And for yourself, how did you end up falling in love with nutrition and deciding to make that, something you'd go to school for as well as even build a business around?
Yeah. Well, like I kind of alluded to, I had a pretty challenging relationship with food and my own journey when I was kind of getting started in college. I thought I wanted to be a nurse and I wanted to go to nursing school
Mhm.
because it was a good job and it was safety and it was like, all these things. And I'm very much a like, I want to do things the right way type of person. Um,
Mhm.
and so I was doing everything that I should be doing to become a nurse, right? Taking all the classes, getting good grades, volunteer work, doing the clubs, et cetera, et cetera. And I actually got denied from nursing school three
Oh,
rounds in
wow.
a row. So almost 2 years I was set back. But I don't like to quit on things. So I was just like,
Clearly.
yeah, my advisor was like, I honestly have no idea what to tell you. And so for me, it felt very, rock bottom seems dramatic, but I had to take a really hard look at what it was that I wanted to do and why did I want to be a nurse? Well, I didn't want to work in a hospital, and I
Mm.
didn't want like I didn't enjoy didn't enjoy the idea of what I had to do as a nurse, and so universe, God, whatever somebody may believe in, like I just knew that it was this impasse telling me, no, there's something different that you
Mm.
are meant to be doing. And so, at the time I was kind of struggling with some, my own weight loss and kind of disordered eating patterns. And, college is kind of a funky time anyway, kind of figuring out how to live on your own and all of that. And so, I actually thought back to a gen ed that I had taken my freshman year, just general nutrition or nutrition, whatever it was called, because I took it because I was interested. And after I was kind of at this, okay, I need to figure what I'm doing out, I did some more research and I even discovered what a registered dietitian was because I had no idea.
Mm,
And so I was like, oh wow, this is pretty great. So I did some more research and ended up switching my major, and it was really great because not only was I finally very engaged and interested in what I was learning, but from a personal transformational standpoint, it was just so pivotal because I finally was able to start implementing like kind of these real tangible things and understanding human nutrition and metabolism and it's just how the body works and what it needs. And in turn I was applying that to myself as kind of a live, in-person case study, and I really saw my body composition change. I finally, was able to kind of break free from some of that kind of toxic dieting or disordered eating patterns, whatever it might have been. And so then being ultimately becoming a registered dietitian and seeing how impactful that was for my own relationship with food, because that's a huge piece of it, as well as, reaching and maintaining a body composition that I'm very happy with. I was like, everybody needs to know about this. It's like so many women struggle with dieting. So many women struggle with, and men really,
hmm
their relationship with food, their relationship with their body, because the diet industry is this multi-billion-dollar industry designed to keep you on the hamster wheel and spinning your wheels for decades. And it is so sad and it's so detrimental. And being able to relate to clients being like, hey, I understand this challenge, not always to the same scale that everybody experiences, but
hmm
look at what I've been able to do in my own life. And now I have the credentials and the experience and all of that behind me to help you condense that timeline and get you there with the support and accountability and love that I wish I would have had when I was struggling with it.
Yeah. No, that's amazing. I love that you turned it from obviously like you had your own block you're running into with a career. So many people feel like if you don't persist, you quit and that's like a failure. But instead you looked at that as more of a pivotal trajectory change, not that you were giving up in any respect, but you're looking at, okay, what can I learn from this? Is there a different calling that I have for myself? And you saw that in your own struggles. And I love that you went into an industry that has so much misinformation, but also so many opinions. It's such a confusing world. And it's one of those worlds where I feel as an individual that cares about their health and want to achieve a certain body composition, you can, go into the land of information on the internet and try and make sense of it and go about it. But I feel like it's such a straighter shot, a more enjoyable and fulfilling route to go by working with someone that not only has your credentials, but more importantly, I think has your own hard won personal experience. And of course, the countless success stories that I know you have of people you've worked with. So I really want to give you kudos on just managing all of that in such a way that landed you to where you are. And I'm curious because, I've had friends that were very fit and obviously knew what they were doing to get them certain results. And then they decided to go the route of like, oh, I'll be a personal trainer or something like that. And now you're entering into this whole realm of I'm building a business around, like, a huge part of it is your image, because obviously your image is its own promotion of you doing the right things. And obviously you're a walking billboard when it comes to, oh, I want a body like that, or I want to have the level of energy that she has, or whatever, right? So I'm curious to hear from you. What's the rest of this story include from like having that realization of building this business and helping people to actually getting that business rolling? What were those early days like?
Well, I was a dietitian for several years before I started the business, working in a lot of different realms within dietetics. And that's something that I don't think a lot of people understand. There are dietitians in so many areas of life. Grocery stores have dietitians, school cafeterias have dietitians, all major food service, entities oftentimes have dietitians doing the menuing and the ordering and, all of that sort of thing. And also, of course, in hospitals, inpatient dietetics, meeting with, sick people who potentially are unsafe to eat by mouth. So that's where tube feeding or TPN comes in, or, people who have been admitted to the hospital because they just got diagnosed with diabetes, or they're, in renal failure, whatever it is. There are a lot of these acute situations that dietitians are very important in the care team. And that's, funny enough, where I started. I was like, oh yeah, this is good experience, but it is solidifying that I do not want to be working in a hospital for the rest of my life. And so I was able to transition from there into actually doing the employee wellness nutrition coaching for the same hospital, working with employees. And that was my first taste of kind of that ongoing one-on-one coaching with people. And it really just made me so fulfilled and excited to meet with this person again in a couple weeks and see how the things that we were working on were doing. And that change that really made an impact in their life. Dietitians in the inpatient clinical setting, like I mentioned, are very important and impactful. But I also had to struggle with people pretending to be asleep because they didn't want to talk to you because they don't really care, right? So being able to work with people who actually care and are seeking that help is, for me, much more fulfilling. And so that was kind of my first taste at it. And like I said, I kind of progressed with a couple different roles that helped me continue to solidify my experience, specifically in body composition and sports nutrition, which is what my master's is in. And I worked as a contractor for the Air Force, and so that was really cool to be able to apply that sports nutrition and performance aspect of things to these active duty military members in a way that was like, oh yes, now we're making these tweaks. And that was that next step for me in terms of the body composition changes, to be able to then take the ongoing coaching side of things and seeing that progression in somebody's life, and the tangible, people in the military tend to be very disciplined. And I remember I was working with somebody and we, had all of these different, macros and micros even. He was like, had everything dialed down perfectly. He's like, this is how many milligrams of sodium I had this day and this day and this day. So it was like, okay, so when people are hyper aware of it, what kind of cool things can happen? And then ultimately kind of integrating the two into how can we take this kind of more, how do I want to say, maybe, metrics and, kind of data driven side of things with the, let me meet you where you're at in your real life, because life isn't perfect, and marry the two in a way that we can get really great body composition results, but in a sustainable and, not overwhelming way, because most people are not in the military and maybe don't have that same level of, precision with their nutrition.
Right.
So ultimately, I decided to start my online business. And at the time, I had previously had no social media. And that was something that I actually quite prided myself on and really enjoyed, kind of not being tied to the internet and social media in that way. But if you remember from earlier, I don't quit things, and you may have gathered I don't half-ass things either. And so I was like, okay, well, if I'm going to start an online business, I'm going to have an online presence. And then it was December of 2020 that I decided to kind of go full force into this. Of course, still working full time because I had to, pay my mortgage and whatever else needed to happen at that point. But it was very much a first year of initial success as that validation from the universe to tell me that I was on the right path. I think, I believe. And it was, waking up extra early to get my workout in and then be able to take, one or two calls before I had to go into work. And then on my lunch break, going for a walk during my 30-minute lunch break and taking another client call during that period of time, and then working until 7:30 at night or whatever after I got home to really service all these new clients that I was getting.
Hmm.
And it was great because I was learning so many things, not only about this new online coaching space, something that I hadn't done before, but
Hmm.
also social media and kind of that organic lead generation. And don't get me wrong, it's still something I'm working very hard at. I haven't
Sure.
perfected it by any means, but it was a lot of learning, but also recognizing that this may be hard, but this is exactly where I need to be.
Totally. Now, what prompted you to choose that path? Because you mentioned earlier you had been working in different capacities in this role. And now you're
Hmm.
talking about while also working for someone else, you're now taking on this initiative to get up early, still take care of yourself, do client calls before, in between, after work. So what got you thinking that was a good idea?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I know exactly, for better or for worse, I have always had a lot of things going on at one time. Like when I was in college, I was also working, right? And then
Hmm.
when I was in my dietetic internship, because for those who are unaware, not only do you have to graduate with your bachelor's, and they actually now mandated a master's degree before for a dietitian, then you have to do a year-long unpaid, in fact, you pay to do it, internship where you
Oh,
get
wow.
experience in all of these different areas like I was mentioning before. So you have a rotation in the inpatient clinical setting. You have a rotation where you're maybe working with WIC or dialysis, and then you have your food service rotation, so you're in different school districts, and then you're in like kind of getting that full gamut of not only experience to make sure you're a well-rounded new dietitian, but also to give you that
Mm.
experience to see where you might want to go in terms of your career. So while I was doing that, of course, I had to be working, right?
Hmm.
And then for
Hmm.
whatever reason, I also decided to get my master's at that time. So I was that year was also very chaotic and stressful. So whatever. Fast forward, why did you decide to start a business now after you're technically done with all of your credentials and your schooling and whatever? Like now you get to relax. You only have to work this full time, only work full time. And I
Yeah.
was just like, I have too much free time. I need to like, what am I going to be doing? Just work? No, I should start a business. Like there's, I don't know. That's what I think it boiled down to. Honestly, I was feeling like I was too just not doing enough. Actually.
Sure. No, I love that. Um, I've asked that question to a number of guests, and it's always interesting to see like where were they at in their life when they decided to take on doing their business. Did they do a clean rip from it and go into the other thing? Did they manage what they were doing while going into it? So love your answer of like you felt there was more to do and you had more to give and you just took it on. And I love that mentality of not like waiting for the right time, but just like trusting your gut and knowing I have attention on this. I want to do it. I have an interest in it. I'll take full responsibility for the outcome. Let's go.
Hmm. Just see what happens.
Yeah, exactly. But also like not go at it from like a I'll try this out sort of a thing. But like you obviously took a serious look at making it go right.
Hmm.
So I think that's good. Um, I was going to ask you, so you went into being a solo practitioner. At what point did you feel it made sense to fan out and grow a team underneath you?
So I had dabbled in what scaling would look like for my business for a couple years actually. I got to the point where I was at my limit with how many one-on-one clients I could take. And I
Hmm.
wanted to explore, okay, what if I did some different offers? So one of those being group coaching, where, okay, that seems like, and I know in a lot of other areas or even other dietitians that I had been chatting with, they ran a group coaching program and it was really great because now you have 1 hour a week where you're serving all of these people and you're having really great conversation, and that's a good scaling model for some people. My audience, the people I serve, it didn't really hit. I tried for a couple years to make that work and it
Hmm.
just wasn't working, so I decided to pivot. But ultimately, the opportunity also came across that I was able to start taking insurance in my business, before kind of the first, would it be 4 years was all private pay, which I still do take as my own, private clients. But having this new opportunity of taking insurance and being able to serve so many more people that way, people who potentially didn't have access to, being able to have, the funds to pay for a dietitian, but potentially really needed it. That to
Hmm.
me was very exciting. And so that was kind of what got my gears turning about, okay, what would it look like if I started a group practice, brought on additional dietitians under Zoe Schroeder Nutrition, and then, built a business around the insurance side of things? And so, kind of running it back to that tipping point of what does that look like in terms of actually implementing it. It was
Hmm.
again a year. It was actually my first year of marriage where I decided to take insurance, and that then turned into again 13-hour days because I needed to fill my schedule with as many clients as I possibly could, because
Hmm.
insurance, you're not making the same as when you're working for with private pay clients. But
Sure.
my vision was I need to build as big of a roster as possible, bring on an additional team member, and then be able to actually fill their schedule, because I couldn't bring
Hmm.
somebody on and then not have any clients for them. So
Right.
it was about a year, maybe a little bit less, but I was just tunnel vision and I knew that it was going to be worth it because I knew what I needed to do, and I had
Hmm.
other data to support that when I know it needs to happen, I can make it happen. And so
Yeah.
that's what it ultimately turned into. And so now I have 6 dietitians working as part of Zoe Schroeder Nutrition who take insurance, and that has been really great to move into that role of not just, being kind of that solopreneur of I'm
Yeah.
the person who's doing all of the things, wearing all of the hats and delivering all of the services, but to be able to lead my team and to support them, to then help them support their clients. That has been a really cool next step for me that I'm loving.
I love that. I know I shared this with you when we were initially talking, but I went through a very similar journey with my coaching program because I started out as a solopreneur, solo coach back in 2018. And the first 2 years, I was only concerned with filling my schedule up. When I went into this in 2018, I did a cold rip from the opportunity I was in and just, jumped out of the airplane and figured out how to build a parachute or whatever the saying would be in that case. But we ended up figuring that out. And I got an opportunity where someone was being responsible fully for the marketing and promotion side of things. Because I had ended up in this hamster wheel of I was marketing myself, I was closing for myself, I was onboarding and handling the clients myself. So I would naturally reach a cap. And when certain clients would finish or churn, that's when I could do marketing, but that's too late. And now you have all the financial pressures because, of course, you build your business and you adjust your living expenses and costs of running the business in relation to that. But I would say once I was at the point where I had a means to have a faucet of leads coming in, I took those leads on for the first period of time to make sure that I could basically create a replicatable coaching program, because originally it was just within my own style and how I did it. But then I had to look at how could I do this in a way that got results but was also replicatable, because the coaches I worked with, I didn't necessarily look for a certain level of accreditation or that they went to like business coaching school or something like that. It was more so, how are they at communicating with someone? Have they been in business? Can they like problem solve? And, are they intelligent enough to be able to understand this process and to emulate it? So the first 20 clients that came in through that program, I took on in addition to my client load that I had already had. So that was already pushing me over the edge. But then I brought on 2 new coaches, and I was actually on all of their calls in the beginning for the first 30 to 60 days. So it was even more time. And I had to actually peel off of a very large account that I had, was 30 hours a week, in order to grow this new thing, because I believed in it so much that was going to take off. So I have a lot of, understanding for what you've gone through and what you've built, which I think is, again, it's great to see someone else that's gone this route. While we're on the topic of like your schooling and transitioning to business, obviously with what you've chosen to do, it's a very technical, specialized field. So it warrants, obviously, and is regulated and required that you go through schooling to be able to service people in this way. I'm curious, what have you learned as a business owner in this industry that maybe you wish you were prepped for back in school?
Oh yeah. I mean, the list is quite long because we're taught nutrition, but in a very narrow lens. In fact, in college, it was kind of we were dissuaded from starting a business or from going into private practice because it's too hard, and there's no money in it, blah blah blah. Nobody wants to pay for a private dietitian, and insurance doesn't reimburse, and it's just like it was super frowned upon. And so we were prepped in college and in the internship to work in a hospital or work in all of these different areas like I had mentioned previously. And so I felt extremely ill-equipped for starting a business, and it was that sink or swim situation. Now I will say I've invested from the beginning. I've really valued investing in mentorship and business coaching, and kind of having someone to help guide who's been there before, right? So that has definitely been very helpful. But social media just in general, right? That's a whole social media back in the day was just about place to share your photos with your friends, and now it's turned into this extraordinarily different thing. And that's ever changing, so that work is never done. So that, and it's also just marketing, that's something that is huge, but also more specific to the actual coaching. It was a very different way of doing things than what we were taught of, if you're an outpatient dietitian, you meet with somebody for an hour, you go over everything, you go give them all the handouts, you go over everything, and you're like, okay, see you in 3 months. And if they show up to the follow-up, great. And if not, well, then, oh well.
3 months is a long time to bank on someone coming back.
Right. And then also just the sheer overwhelming amount of information, especially if somebody is coming to you because, they just got a referral to see a dietitian because they just got diagnosed with diabetes. And then you're just word vomiting and dumping all this stuff on them. So being able to shift to a more ongoing coaching style and paring back, like, okay, maybe we just come up with 3 goals that you're going to be working on. And so that's a huge part of it. Something else that I've learned a lot I sometimes say that I wish that I would have done my master's in like counseling and more of the therapy side of things versus sports nutrition,
Mhm.
because that is a hugely underrated but incredibly important piece of what I do. And now I'd say it's what I enjoy even more than the actual nutrition things, is the mindset work, the relationship with yourself work, um,
Mhm.
all of that that's tied into somebody's nutrition, because nutrition is
Right.
highly personal and that relationship with food has been built over their entire life. So that's just something not necessarily on the business side of things, but just unique to what I do, that I had to learn a lot through experience, but now it's something that lights me up so much. And then also just all of the, systems and platform, got to do the email list and figuring
Mhm.
out, automations. And I've turned into much more of a tech, IT person than I ever thought possible. And I
Right.
still struggle. But just all of these different facets that you figure out while you're doing it because there's no other option.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. In a field like this, how do you feel AI enters the picture from a threat to business owners, dietitians in this space? How have you, if at all, kind of welcomed AI into your business? What do you think dietitians need to be doing as far as AI if they're going to stay relevant and obviously helping their clients still?
Yeah. I can relate to feeling scared by AI, right? We don't know what can come of it, whatever. But it would be a mistake to stay scared and try to avoid it at all in my opinion, avoid it at all costs, um, versus integrate it intentionally in a way that potentially could be helpful for the client, for the dietitian, because whether we like it or not, AI is taking over so many industries. And I think whether you're a dietitian or you're any other profession, it's figuring out how can I leverage this to take away some of the busy work that maybe I don't like to do or don't want to be doing, and can put that over there. So an example of this is, and I don't do meal plans for people. I never, well, I shouldn't say I never have, because I did at the beginning and I saw like how it was not helpful at
Yeah.
all. But this is an example. Also, maybe like recipes, or I'm going out to this restaurant. Here are my macros that I'm trying to hit for the day. What's whatever. So being able to, maybe there's a dietitian out there who still does custom meal plans for people, but it takes a lot of time, speaking from experience, right? Making sure that you get all the macros hit, and taking into consideration someone preferences and blah blah blah. So in terms of the like
Totally.
daily workflow, leverage it in that way so you can open up your time for more of that human connection piece. We don't need to just be writing meal plans. That's not what people need. People need that emotional connection, and that's something that AI cannot replace. And so leverage it to help you do the stuff that it can, and really hone in on your skills and your strengths as a provider and as a person that people are wanting to work with, because people hire coaches because they like the coach themselves. There's a
Sure.
ton of coaching programs out there. There's a ton of like obviously a ton of information and all of that, but if they relate to you as a person and they like you, your vibe, like how you guys get along, and they feel safe with you, that's
Hmm.
that's something that cannot be replaced.
Right. Well, to what you were saying earlier with like the way that the system is that you were kind of indoctrinated on following, where someone is just overloaded with information and then they're scheduled to return back in 3 months. I've seen this just as a coach myself. The information's out there, so it's probably not necessarily a shortage of information or that they can't find the information. Obviously, you can run to like, oh, well, this guy says do cardio. This person says don't do cardio. What do I believe? So you can run to that. But regardless, having someone that knows who you are, knows what you want to achieve, is more of an expert in the space and has hard-won experience than you do, that you can just talk to, is so invaluable. To have someone that holds you accountable and is actually there with you through the journey, not, hey, come back in 3 months and we'll see what's happening. I will do my best to try and remember who you are before you walk in 3 months and remember what you're dealing with. But that is something that AI can't replace. And for those, especially in your world, that embrace it to just promote themselves more, to make their workflows easier, to really use it as a tool, just like how a contractor would use a hammer and a nail, right? This is one of your tools to expand your business versus, oh no, like so many people are going to be asking chat like what their macros should be and what their workout plan should be and stuff like that. But again, like there's been books on this stuff for quite some time. People have gone out and read all the diet books and exercise books and all that stuff. They still weren't doing it. And that's where having the human element of someone that cares about you and is actually there for you and checking on you bridges that gap. Because if you didn't need them, you would have already solved the problem. You wouldn't still be facing that situation.
Yeah, exactly. And I would say the vast majority of people who I talk with who are maybe potential clients say, I know what to do, I'm just not doing it. And
yes.
And that's, I'm sure we see that all over many different spaces, but
Totally.
bridging the knowing what to do and actually doing it comes from that accountability and the let's figure out a way to do it that works with your life.
Totally. Now, one thing that I've come across, just again, this is online too. I don't want to generalize something, but I know that many executives or people in business run into the challenge with prioritizing their health and prioritize their sleep because they're so consumed with what they're doing with work, right? So speaking to our listeners that are entrepreneurs and maybe want to prioritize health a bit more, what relation do you see between health and success, and what are some things that every person should just be doing in terms of basics that maybe they're overlooking, that if they just did those things, that would already put them like in a better frame of mind for success with their business?
Yeah, I love this question because so many clients that I work with are busy. Maybe they're not entrepreneurs, maybe they are, but it's a common theme of work first or family first or whatever it is, me on the back burner. And I always like to challenge that with, you are actually doing your work, your business, your family, whoever it is, a disservice by not prioritizing yourself first. Because we've all heard it, can't pour from an empty cup, but what does that actually mean? I would say everybody, I know a lot of people like intermittent fasting, but I would almost 100% recommend to eat breakfast. Make sure you get some protein and please, for the love of God, eat breakfast, because your mind will be so much sharper. You'll have so much more energy. You won't be having the sugar cravings later in the, I hear these same things so many times. Oh, I just can't control myself at night. And I'm sure a lot of business owners and entrepreneurs listening, potentially wake up, start the day, look at emails, whatever, and potentially just get wrapped up into the work until, oh my gosh, it's 11 o'clock. I haven't eaten anything. So just building in that habit, something that I have found really helpful for me too, and this is still a work in progress, but I do think it's very helpful, is having at least 30 minutes, but ideally as long as you can, in the morning, screen free. So I like to go for a walk or, go to the gym or whatever it is. If you are looking at a screen first thing when you wake up, you're in bed, you grab your phone and you immediately start with emails or
that was the last
media.
thing you looked at before you went to bed too.
Exactly. And that's a very hard habit to break, But I know for myself, like this morning, I got up, went for a run, made breakfast, got ready, yada yada, and then sat down at my desk at 7:30 and looked at emails because it was not going to
Mm-hmm.
do me any good by looking at all these emails that I needed to address, but I knew that I wanted to do X, Y, and Z things before my day actually started, and I deserved that.
Mm-hmm.
Because going back to it would be doing my clients, it would be doing my team, it would be doing this podcast a disservice if I was not fueled and
Mm-hmm.
like taken care of in a way that I know for me makes me feel good. And for a lot of people, it takes a little bit of time to break a habit and get into a new one to be able to even identify that they weren't feeling good in the first place. And no, coffee does not count as breakfast.
It does not, but it definitely staves off what you're feeling for breakfast for sure.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
Okay, good.
try to get some movement, try to limit the screen first thing, and make sure you're eating
Hmm.
from the dietitian.
I love it. Well, also just from the aspect of doing your best work, what I found is that someone asked me this question one time, which is, if you were to arrive to your life at peak performance, what would you have done to get yourself into that state of mind or being? Right.
Mm,
And so, like, the screen thing, I probably has a lot to do physiologically, but I also think mentally that's a huge thing too, of like being able to, like, there's a freaking palm tree outside my window. Like, oh my God, this is reality. I see mountains, I see depth, I see people and things out there. I wake up, don't look at the screen, work out, um, run my life basically how I want to run my life and not feel like I am disappointing anyone or should feel guilty that, God forbid, like, I'm doing things other than work, right? But actually pour into my mental well being spiritually and also physiologically. So I love
mhm.
that you had answered the way you did on that point. So Zoe, I was curious, two quick questions, and then if we have time, I might go into another one. What would you say has been the biggest key to growing your business?
I, I, I just have to say, not giving up on it. It's been 5.5 years and I'm still working towards growing it. I think I remember, I might be getting the statistic wrong, but something like, in 1 in 10 businesses in 10 years will still be there,
Right.
right? And
Hmm.
so just being able to continue to show up, yes, like process improvement and systems and growing a team and whatever, but ultimately it boiled down to not feeling defeated enough to quit. And
Hmm.
there were plenty of times because, like, I don't have to do this. You know, there are plenty of jobs for, dietitians out there, and it could be very much easier. Um, but staying true to that why, just like I tell with clients, you have to remember the why to in order to, you're not always going to feel motivated. So honestly, growing the business 5.5 years later, it's just about continuing to show up, and maybe it's not like groundbreaking every day, but can we at least be making it a priority?
Yeah, absolutely. I think knowing what your why is super important because you're going to face adversity and challenges along the way on any goal that's meaningful, right? If you weren't, then that goal isn't really stretching you. You could be stretching yourself way further. But you need to have that why locked in and also have that North Star goal you're working towards, having little checkpoints and milestones along the way, I think is critically important. But I always like knowing what is that next chapter for you beyond that as well. So what would you say that you're currently working towards right now? What goal are you pushing towards?
Yeah. And that's something too, like you were saying, having those checkpoints, that's something that I've really valued working with you, is that we've been able to, I kind of expressed like, okay, here's kind of where I want to be. And
Hmm.
you helped me create that next checkpoint. And then, we're laying out the plan of what I need to do to get there. And that has been extremely valuable because I only know, so much. And so
Hmm.
being able to kind of, especially from the growing and scaling perspective, that's kind of that next, how can I continue to work on the business rather than in the business quite so much. And
Hmm.
so, in terms of like that next checkpoint, and what we've been working towards in my business, by the end of the year, I'd like to have kind of a lead manager, maybe, sales person, taking on a lot of that lead management that I'm currently doing. Obviously continuing to grow and support the dietitians as we continue to grow that as well. But really just systemizing a lot of these things that I haven't in the past. And I know that that'll, hopefully create this momentum that requires less of my hands on.
Love it. Yeah, really shifting into having a system and business underneath you that can function without you or with you in a more supervisory operator type role, which will reward you with a bunch of other potentials and, directions that you can take it in. But I definitely see that
Mhm.
as the right next step for where you're at.
Yeah, excited. And it'll happen because we're going to make it happen.
That's right. Absolutely. We won't stop.
Yep.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Zoe, for sharing your story and all of the nuggets and insights you've had in growing your business. I hope that our listeners were able to take away something, whether they're in a similar field as your own, or they can just look at it from the periphery and see how they can apply it to their business. Any parting advice that you would want to give to someone that is maybe in a similar position to yourself right now with what you're doing on your business?
Oh, I would say if you're if you're just kind of trying it out, get clear on the why, like we were talking about
Hmm.
before, because that'll help carry you forward in those, low motivation periods. But also investing back into your business and investing in coaching or support from somebody who knows more than you, it's not, to me, it's not an expense. Even if it puts you in the red for that month, it's going to, you're going to get that investment back because you don't know what you don't know. And you
Hmm.
may as well learn and grow from somebody who can help guide you. And, even if you're not making very much money, it's scary, but that investment, I think, sets the tone. Because if you're not willing to invest in yourself and your personal growth, how do you expect somebody to invest in you and your business?
Hmm. Love it. Thank you, Zoe. Appreciate you so much.
Thank you. It was great having the conversation. Talk to you later.
Totally.